Right.
agreeing to speak to us. Maybe we can begin by you telling me a little bit about the history and the development of the IATF.
Excellent. So thank you very much once again. The idea behind setting up the Intra-African Trade Fair was something that was muted in the 70s, actually, by the then Organization of African Unity, which is the forebearer to what we have today as the AU. The concept was more like to develop a platform that can enable more trade to happen between African countries at the time. So that was a priority then. But unfortunately, it didn't get so much traction as at the time. So that's why it went mute for a while until AFREXIMBANK revived it in 2018. And reviving it followed the fact that AFREXIMBANK set up our Intra-African Trade Initiative at the time. And that Intra-African Trade is meant to support and grow the numbers of trade possible in Africa significantly, because at the time, we found out that Africa was trading more with other regions than with Africa itself. At the time, of course, the numbers was about 5 to 7% of trade happening between African countries. And we found out that it's something that critically needed to be adjusted so that we can take it to at least 20%, 25%. And the bank, in ensuring that this happens, set up the Intra-African Trade Initiative so that will be focused solely on identifying means of improving these low trade numbers between Africans. And it was discovered at the time that one of the main reasons why Africa was not trading among itself is also lack of information. You find that as close as Nigeria is to Ghana, for instance, it's difficult for Nigerian buyers to see what they can buy in Ghana because they don't have information. If you search for information on the internet, they have to give you information on some goods that are available from China, without you also knowing that you could even get it cheaper and better quality next door. So that lack of information was a big challenge. And what that meant is that we needed to create a platform through which we can address it. And at the time, the idea of Intra-Africa Trade Fair became inevitable as our way to create a solution to this nagging problem. And indeed, I would say that it's been a success story so far. First edition of this fair took place in Egypt in 2018, and the agreement was to ensure that it happens biannually, so that every 2 years it gets to happen. But unfortunately, the second edition was delayed because of COVID in 2020. But because of resilience, we still made sure it took place in 2021 in Durban, South Africa. And the third edition went back to Egypt in 2023, where we also had the Intra-African Trade Fair in Egypt. And the fourth edition is going to take place in Algiers, Algeria, in September this year. And that's going to be precisely between the 4th and the 9th of September this year. And that's the first time it's happening in Algeria. One of the things that comes readily to mind is to point out the fact that from the previous editions, we've had consistently over 40,000 people visiting the fair, so which shows an enormous turnout. And we've had exhibitors ranging over 1,500 exhibitors from different countries in Africa. That for us is a success story in itself. This year, we are anticipating to have at least 40,000 people visit the fair physically. And remember, we also created a virtual trade fair, which is also something that's continuous. We're also expecting more than 2,000 exhibitors from over 100 countries to come in and exhibit their wares. And what's the issue is to make sure that they can showcase what they have to the global community. They can showcase the unique products. And initiatives and ideas that are available from these countries to the world, to not just Africa, but to the rest of the world. And most importantly, also create an opportunity to interact with the global community. Because one of the ideas or one of the expected benefits of the Intra-African Trade Fair is that also it provides opportunity for business-to-business engagement, for business-to-government engagement, because these are all very critical. It shows opportunities as well for people to showcase what they have that are unique to their country, for cultural exchanges as well, which is absolutely important because we found out that we don't get to tell our stories ourselves. We rely on foreign media to do so. We need to begin to take this initiative on our own and then drive this conversation by ourselves. And most importantly, also, it gives opportunity for businesses to meet and match. Now, judging from previous experiences, we've seen deals, over 140 billion or so already signed, cumulatively from all the previous editions. This year's event is not going to be anything different because once we open doors for people to interact among themselves, for people to engage among themselves, the next thing that follows is that partnerships are struck, deals are signed, and engagements begin to happen. And we will also use the opportunity to check the successes recorded from previous editions as a way of keeping track and monitoring to make sure that also we keep the initiatives ongoing.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think one of the logical questions that people would ask, this is an intra-African trade fair. Why should people in the Caribbean be interested in it?
Very good question, Kenton. And one thing about Africa now is that we've moved from referring to Africa as the geographic continent Africa, as we know it today. Now we know the concept of global Africa has been launched, and of course, it's an initiative that's also been driven by the bank. And that concept means that Africa is not just Africa in the geographic space of Africa, but it also includes Africans and African diasporas, no matter where they find themselves. In 2018, we do know, of course, that the African Union recognized its diaspora as a sixth region. And this diaspora also largely includes the Caribbean, where we have a lot of historic ties, binding us from centuries back. So that means when we're not talking about Africa, we are now referring to Africa generally, including the Caribbean. And we would also know that events progressed in the sense that in 2021, the historic AU CARICOM Summit also happened, validating that declaration of the sixth region. That means that we now needed to work hand in hand to foster the ties and the bonds between Africa and the Caribbean. So that's another pointer. And taking it forward, we also do know that efforts are being put in place to put together an Africa-Caribbean Business Forum, which will also foster this particular idea behind creating a vibrant Africa-Caribbean relationship. But also important to note is that the bank, in leading from the front with regards to making sure that these initiatives see the light of the day, we set up the Caribbean Office in 2023. And that Caribbean Office, the first outside the continent Africa, is to showcase the fact that we believe strongly in the global African concept. And we want to see more trade happen between Africa and the Caribbean. For instance, if you look at the numbers today, according to ITC, we have trade between Africa and the Caribbean at less than $700 million. That's abysmally low and needs to be worked on. Now, going by the projections by the same ITC, we think that number could be increased to over $1.8 billion by 2028. And it's our intention not just to make it $1.8 billion, but to grow it even more, so that in today's era where we see geopolitical issues crop up from now and then, we now need to create a bond between ourselves, which is a very sustainable one, which can help us create resilience, especially in times of trouble, in terms of issues. So having the Caribbean on board actually is something that is critical for the success of the IATF. We believe with the launching of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in 2018, that created a 1.4 billion market, people's market, 1.4 people market, which is the biggest, globally. I mean, there's no other free trade area that can compare to that. And what that means is that opens up opportunity for the Caribbean as well, because small manufacturers or medium-sized manufacturers within the region will now have access to a large market, leveraging on the AFCFTA to create access to a new market, which is actually bigger and more sustainable. We know what's happening currently. Our traditional trading partners are coming up with measures that are aimed at restricting trade between us and them. But that means we now also need to create a long-lasting partnership among ourselves that's going to be sustainable. And I want to also give you an example that, to buttress this point. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we rightfully saw some of our traditional partners turn their back somehow to us in the process of vaccine allocation. They, of course, prioritize themselves, which is the right thing to do at the time, but which also sent a message that we needed to create a solution for ourselves. We needed to begin to, take the lead, take the driver's seat by ourselves instead of relying on others to carve out solutions for us. And the bank worked with the African Union and the CARICOM Secretariat then to create a platform that facilitated the purchase of vaccine for Africa and the CARICOM in an on-time basis. And because we were able to pull our demands together, we were able to have a huge amount of requests that came in from all the countries. And the bank put down a $2 billion guarantee to facilitate the supply by Johnson & Johnson of the vaccines. And what that meant also is that we presented Africa and the Caribbean as a unit. We were able to negotiate a very low price that ensured that small countries like Dominica and St. Kitts got the vaccine at the same rate with bigger countries like Nigeria and Egypt. So that's historic, and that's a precursor to tell us what we stand to gain when we work together. So the idea which I'm trying to stress is the fact that Caribbean is integral in what we're talking about when we talk about Africa. Is part of the global Africa concept, and we want to make sure that the Caribbean takes advantage that the trade fair presents to showcase what they have on offer, not just to the bigger African market, but of course to the global community who will be there, because the IATF is now it has grown beyond not just Africa, but of course it's now a global event.
Okay, you were speaking about the takeaway, and that's where I want to go next. What does AFREXIMBANK see as some of the specific opportunities for Caribbean businesses or Caribbean people on a whole that can come out of this fair?
Well, one thing I want to emphasize first and foremost is that the Caribbeans they're one of us. We've been divided just by the ocean, but of course we share a rich tapestry of history, which spanned centuries back. Now, we want to integrate our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean and what we're doing in Africa. We want to get to know what is available and what is on offer from the Caribbean. And we also want the Caribbean team to also get to see what's available in Africa, because that way we are assured that we can forge lasting partnerships between these two regions. Of course, like I said, we've seen this happen skeletally in the past. Of course, Republic Bank, which is a Trinidadian bank set up in Ghana, which was very, very encouraging to see that bold initiative. We've also seen a Nigerian company being announced to take over the running of a refinery in Trinidad and Tobago. So we want to see a lot more of similar initiatives. We want to be able to now do more, discuss more the challenges that we face, and also together carve out a solution, because no other person can do it for us, truth be told. We have to take our destiny in our own hands. And there's no better platform to do that than this kind of initiatives that the bank is creating through the IATF, through the Africa Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, which is also the next event that is very, very important and relevant to our people. Some of the common problems that we see that require absolute urgent attention is the need that we need to create connectivity. We have to solve our connectivity problem. For all we know, we can't keep relying on our Western neighbors to create access between ourselves, because that diminishes significantly efforts that at the diplomatic level that is being made to create visa-free access between citizens of the Caribbean and citizens of Africa. We need to create that straight through air connectivity. We need to create sea connectivity as well, so that we don't need to have to stop over somewhere before we make we assess one country or the other. So this is something that events of this nature opens up opportunity for us to dialogue on, and also to portray the fact that the bank is interested to see how we can also support and create this kind of connectivity and make it happen. One thing I also need to stress is the fact that whilst we talk about creating connectivity, creating business-to-business partnerships, and signing MOUs, signing business deals together, it's also important to emphasize that the bank is ready to add financial strength and muscle to it. A critical element can also make business-to-business initiatives successful is finance. And to a large extent, this has also been one of the issues that are working against the Africa-Caribbean relationship. So we also want to provide financing as much as possible to make sure we facilitate this and make it see the light of the day.
Okay, so we are speaking about the trade forum in Algiers, but before that, AFREXIMBANK is having a very important activity in Grenada, which is the Active 2025. Tell me a little bit more about that.
You've summed it up correctly, Kenton. It is indeed a very important engagement in Grenada and a perfect precursor to the Intra-African Trade Fair in Algiers. Now, the idea behind the Africa Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, was conceived after the AU CARICOM Summit in 2021, where they made it clear the intention to create connectivity, create more business opportunities between ourselves. And we know that we don't have a lot of information among ourselves. We've been kept so much apart from each other. And this forum was now designed to bring in business people from the Caribbean, from Africa, in the same room to talk about nothing but business and how they can work together. So the first edition took place in Barbados in 2022, following that AU Summit in 2021. So we had the first edition in Barbados, and it was a resounding success because for the first time, we had to get a charter to bring in business people from Africa into the Caribbean, of course, precisely Barbados at the time. And that created a lot of business connections. I do know that a lot of people who came because of the forum had to come back to Barbados on their own now to explore the tourism potentials that the country presents. This wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't created an event of this nature. That's an example. So taking it forward, we had the second edition in Guyana, and it was a resounding success. We had well over 1,700 attendees, which was also similar to what we had in Barbados. and deals were also signed. And of course, a charter flight also came in from Guyana to from Africa to Guyana, bringing in business people to discuss business. Buoyed by this successes recorded, the bank made a decision to not just bring the third edition to life, but also link it up with our flagship event, which is the AFREXIMBANK annual meetings. So it took place for the first time in the region in June 2024 in Nassau, the Bahamas. And that was the mother of it all because we had almost 4,000 people in attendance. And it opened up a lot of people's eyes to what benefits exist that if Caribbean and Africa trades together, if Caribbean and Africa works together. I do know that a lot of people who attended that event have gone ahead to bring up initiatives on their own. They become champions, so to say, of this global Africa concept, trying to create leeway that can foster Africa-Caribbean relationships. And I give you an example. I know in March this year, a Nigerian consulting outfit who was present in Bahamas and was encouraged by the messaging had to set up an investment forum in Abuja with country focus on St. Kitts and Nevis. And that event was attended by the Prime Minister and the Premier of Nevis, and as well as their team. And of course, drew a lot of participation from Africa. So these are all evidence to show that the messaging is resonating, is bearing fruit. I also do know that a lot of partnerships were formed. There are companies discussing with their partners in Guyana to see how they can partner. Because, for instance, Nigeria is an oil-rich country that have had experience with oil exploration, and companies are also experienced in that space. We see a lot of connectivity now happening with them trying to also see how they can foster partnerships like in countries that have new oil discoveries like Guyana and Suriname. And these are all things that wouldn't have been possible if not because we have the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum creating this solution. So the fourth edition, we expect to be a huge success as well. It's going to take place in St. George's, Grenada, between the 28th and 29th of July, and a perfect way to usher in the bigger event, which is going to be the Intra-African Trade Fair taking place in Algiers. Now, we expect the Caribbeans to use that as an opportunity to showcase what they have on offer. We're having a lot of interest now because people have seen successes from the past edition. Guyana is keen to have their small businesses and some other types of SMEs take up a stand to showcase what they have. The Grenada is also active. They are also mobilizing internally for people to showcase what they have. And it's also another opportunity because for us, this is happening in the OECS for the first time. So we are taking the exhibition just beyond Guyana alone to also create a forum where we talk about investment opportunities in the OECS generally. Because these are all the things that come up. Opportunity for us to talk about our common problem, opportunities for us to focus on how to foster a common solution to these problems as well. It's all in the same place. And what is more, if you look at the caliber of people who attend, well-known business people, successful business partners from across the continent, and as well as policymakers, government officials, then it is a perfect platform where when we discuss, we can go out with concrete resolutions because all the parties who should have their voice in the discussion have lent their voice to it, and whatever solution we have, factored out can actually easily be implemented. So these are the values that this brings. I mean, there wouldn't be any better place for us to have this kind of thing happen than the active. So we do we do encourage business people within the region to participate actively. It is a huge opportunity for them that they should leverage on. No matter how small the production is, you can showcase it to a bigger market. Like I did mention earlier, Africa is a 1.4 billion people market. is never, I mean, you can never get it wrong with such a number, and that has potentials even to increase production that we have. And of course, not just those who are showcasing us, the other business people should also come in and see opportunity to interact with other business people coming in, get ideas on global best practice on how they can also shape up their own businesses to give it a global output. One of the focus we try to create is access to market. So that means we aim to also look at those who are dealing on a small scale locally to give them access to international markets. So the international market may not necessarily be into Africa, but it could also be regionally, because when we have participation from different countries within the region, that also creates opportunity for us to enhance intra-regional trade as well as trade between the region as a whole and Africa.
Okay, thanks for that. I have another question. Sorry. I was saying I had another question that is not directly related to these two trade fairs, but it's a follow up to the conversation we had in March when you were speaking about the piloting of the Pan African payment system. And you had said that that a successful pilot had been done in Barbados and between Barbados and the Bahamas the previous month, which was in February. And you were saying that it was gonna move to Suriname, where a pilot would have been done, and then it would move to the next phase. Are you in a position to give an update on that?
Yes, of course. The update is that with the success of the proof of concept, the pilot is now ongoing. I know there was a meeting of the central bank governors last week, and it was one of their agenda items. Now, everybody has come to terms with the value that what we call the Caribbean payment and settlement system brings to solving the huge foreign currency liquidity challenge that the region faces, and everybody is on board. So we have seen that the concept is real, it can solve the problem. We also have the backing of the central banks who see this as a very important tool that's going to help solve some of the problem. But what we will now begin to do with this successful test that have gone on is to now start the fine details of how to begin the implementation, which will include not just the central banks, but also the commercial banks. And most importantly, it goes down to the customers who are doing regional business, so that they can also be understand how they will be part of it, just to make things easier for them. The ultimate objective will be that with the PAPS, which is the African version, already operational, we urgently need to have the CAPS also active and working, so that this is going to be the best way to drive home the conversation we are having about boosting Africa Caribbean trade. Now, because when we have a viable payment platform, cross-regional payment platform that works actively in both regions, it's easy for us to now synchronize the two. Now making it even more easier for business between CARICOM and Africa to happen.
Thank you so very much for that. I think those are all the questions. I just need to ask you, please, if you can just say your name again slowly so that the presenter would know how to pronounce it properly.
My name is Okechukwu Ihejirika.
I think that helps a lot.
Yes, that helps, right?
Yes, it does.
Fine. And yeah, but now that I have you, I think it's also important maybe just to highlight a few things that has happened since the setup of the Caribbean office,
Sure, go ahead.
leveraging on your wide coverage. Of course, as you know, we set up in 2023, and is instructive to highlight that within 2 years, the balance sheet has grown significantly. Of course, we're looking at over $700 million in terms of balance sheet right now. And we also have a pipeline of deals that we have lined up, which also goes into about $2.5 billion that we are looking at. Notable disbursements that we have had is the climate-linked sustainability finance that we disbursed into St. Lucia. That was the very first. And then the support for the sports development in Barbados as well, which is also very important. There's the SME-driven support that we have for the Bahamas, which was disbursed through the Bahamas Development Bank and targeted to help the SMEs in the country who have difficulty having access to stable financing because, of course, some of the things they do, the traditional lending institutions, the commercial banks, may find it unattractive, may find it riskier to get involved in. But because we believe these are all very critical aspects of developing the country, we have, in partnering with the Bahamas Development Bank, also disbursed funds targeted at those levels of institution. We've also worked on tourism-linked facilities in Grenada, where we're helping expand one of the hotels, which is also going to be something we are going to significantly scale up within the region, being that we are also considering tourism-related facilities in the Barbados, in Guyana as well, and many other countries. Finally, the big one also is the fact that we have helped bring in investment in a member country where we are, through the fact that we have expressed confidence, other lenders have also come in to help raise the funds required to help Suriname participate in the 20% required for the development of their the oil block 58, which is going to be sensational for the country in the sense that it's going to significantly improve the lot of the country. So these are the kind of things that we bring to the region, actively involved in creating the connection. We are having discussions potentially to see the problem of A and C link connectivity solved. We're offering opportunities for students from the region to also intern with the bank, thus giving them an opportunity to also understand and get a view firsthand of Africa and see how things can be done better, and so on. So there are a couple of other things we are doing on the creative side, which is also going to be the first of its kind, so to say, because the so-called orange economy is a difficult one, and it's difficult for traditional lenders to step in there. So, but through our Creative Africa Nexus initiative, we also hoping that we are able to make an impact there. In terms of industrialization, which is one of our core pillars, we're also working hard with two of the countries to set up industrial parks. Industrial parks is a way of ensuring that productivity, the industrialization efforts in the region stands, just like what we've done in Africa, that we stop the exporting of labor, outsourcing of labor from the region through creating a channel where productions happen right within our own shores, and to create opportunity for us also to increase increase employment opportunities for our people, increase productivity capacity in our country, and also reduce the incidence of exporting of of commodities in raw form. So we now do a lot more of value-added exports through the industrial parks, which we are working on creating the solutions to.